Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video I wanted to talk about a few topics. So in my latest test I did 100 layer maps. Now I don't want to talk about too specifically about my kind of results. What I really want to talk about is some of the stuff in red maps to do with the league mechanic, how indoor maps felt, and some of my latest discoveries. So in the background here you will see me doing Lair, and we will bring up the spreadsheet for Lair as well so you guys can take a little bit of a peek at the results I got. But there is a few things that I really do want to talk about. So I'll go over the premise for this test to begin with. So I've been messaged quite a few times about the new divination card Pride of the First Ones. So this new divination card, basically you can hand 7 of them in for a Farrell's Fur. And the idea is that it drops in Lair currently. People have sent me screenshots, they've told me it drops here, so I was like, I'm gonna check this out. So I decided to buy up 100 red layers and I went to town. Now this, in hindsight, didn't prove to be the best decision because I didn't make too much currency in this kind of scenario. I would have been better off farming City Square, but you know, you got to try some new things, and it had big potential. Now the reason it had big potential is because if it did indeed drop the Pride of the First One's card, it would not only drop that, but it would also drop the Wolven King's Bite, giving it 2 very, very powerful tier 1 divination cards. One giving Real Wars Quills and one giving Farrell's Fur. So that was the idea behind it, and that's why I dove straight in. I chiseled every map, Alk, Val, and 4 yellow sextants, even with the increase in price. I was convinced that if both of these cards would drop on a decent-ish kind of drop rate, I was going to make a lot of currency. However, obviously once we get to the results, you guys will see that that didn't exactly happen. Now, another thing I want to talk about though is really how the Legion mechanic feels in indoor maps, what happens to the Legion mechanic in kind of the red map setting, and kind of just like details around that. So we'll get straight into it. I also want to discuss briefly yellow sextants. So in the new expansion or the new patch, whatever this is, yellow sextants kind of received a bit of a buff. They received some new, very powerful yellow sextant modifiers. Now the main one I want to talk about here is the Harbinger one. So one of the new sextants for yellow sextants is that the boss is accompanied by a mysterious Harbinger. So that these are basically blue guys who drop a ton of currency shards. Now some of the shards are Ancient Orb shards, Harbinger shards, Exalted shards, and Annulment shards. Now when they say they drop shards, they generally don't drop too many, but this sextant modifier adds tons more to them. It says they drop additional shards, but it's actually like double or triple, which is pretty insane. So when they drop, they basically just drop them everywhere, just dump them out. Now what's pretty cool about this is it also makes it affect the boss. So you basically get 2 Harbingers worth, or basically like 4 if you consider it as double. So it's like adding 4 Harbingers to your map. And then what's really cool is it actually affects all additional Harbingers that you add to the map as well. So in this test I was using a couple rusted Harbinger scarabs, and I went through about 12 of them, so I got the sextant 4 times in 100 maps, so it's pretty rare. But what you'll notice in my data is that I actually made half an exalt just off these guys alone, and I also made a couple of annulment orbs off this too. So this by itself should actually pay back the cost difference between white and yellow sextants, which means that yellow sextants are definitely probably more worth using right now at only 1C more expensive than white sextants, which is kind of hard to get your head around, but once you get this modifier you'll probably understand a little bit more, because you just really do get so many shards off them and so many exalted shards on average. So I got 10 over 100 maps, so that's pretty good. That's basically half an exalt extra, which is pretty nice. So that's that. Let's get straight into how the Legion mechanic feels in red maps and what I discovered. So in terms of how it feels in indoor maps, it actually felt really bad. Having to run around corners and stuff like that, it's just atrocious. Once we get to the results, you'll notice that I don't get too many less rewards, because I was still able to crack out the majority of the army a lot of the time, but I found myself dying a lot. It didn't feel good, and I wasn't having as much fun as I do in open layout maps. So while it's not really any less efficient, probably in my opinion, unless there's some big thing going on with red maps, which I don't know about, which we'll talk about in a second, it just definitely doesn't feel as good or as fun, even though there's like some really high quality divination cards in here, and in theory it should be the best currency. So with that out of the way, we'll get straight into now the tinfoil hat stuff. Let's put it on tinfoil hat mode. What's going on in red maps? So I can confirm that the red maps 100% have a different drop table than white maps. It's a fact. I know exactly why as well, and here's my proof. So when I was running 4 and 5 way conflicts for a long time, like I've done a lot of those things, probably it's over 150 now of those. I noticed that certain things would drop in certain ways. So one of the main drops which I noticed, which is very distinct, is that sometimes the encounters would drop stacks of 3 red sextants. Like it would just drop a stack and it would be 3 of them. And now it happened all the time and it was always 3. And currencies don't drop in stacks really at all ever in the game. So it had to be the Legion. Now, I never noticed this in white maps or yellow maps ever. Maybe someone has had it. I'd be interested to hear it in the comments. But in red maps, I actually saw it twice in this tier 11 test. I saw the Legion drop a stack of 3 red sextants. So it doesn't happen often, but it definitely does happen. So that means that red maps are on a different loot table, or at least they're on a better loot table for some reason, or I got very lucky. But I'm almost certain that they do have a different drop rate. And I was also noticing other things which I only noticed in the 5-way conflicts happen in red maps as well. And the other instance that I noticed is that a gem cutter box kind of thing, or a gem cutter mob dropped like 5 GCPs. Now that just didn't happen for me in white maps. Maybe I'm unlucky, but I just didn't notice that happening. So very, very interesting indeed. And once we get to the data, you'll also see that I got a significant, and by significant I mean triple the amount of Templar splinters as compared to both my white tests, meaning that Templar splinters are way more common in red maps, also leading me to believe that Templar faction kind of spawns more often in red maps as opposed to yellow and white. So that's very interesting information as well for you guys to stash away in your back pocket. So the upshot of this is that red maps may indeed be worth running, especially with the better loot table and the increase in like kind of Templar splinters. Now we'll get straight into the data. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I do want to show you guys kind of what happened, where all my money went in the test, and if you should follow suit. So we'll talk about a few economic things here, but the main thing I want to talk about is expenses. So in terms of the expenses, I bought the Lair maps, 3C each, not too bad. I ended up running 102 of these just because I wanted to finish off the sextant set. I spent 641 chaos on my yellow sextants, so I was really feeling the burn on the price increase on those, which is a bit unfortunate, but you know, what are you gonna do? I wanted to do the test and I paid big time for it. Next up we have the Val Orbs. Pretty cheap. Alex, pretty cheap. Chisels, I did decide to chisel all the maps just because I really wanted to see that prior to the first one card drop. I wanted to give it as many chances as it could to have like a drop, but we didn't in fact get it. Now in this test we actually had 0 item quantity and we had no Wind Ripper equipped. So it was a pure kind of just speed, and we wanted to see what would drop in that scenario without having Magic Find affect it. So in terms of the actual map, it didn't feel too great, as I said, because of the Legion in there. It might be just as effective, as you'll see in the currency section down here. We got a similar amount of currency. Having said that though, we did have an extra sextant and we did chisel all the maps. So probably going to be a less than average turnout here in terms of currency compared to white maps, which we can see here. A lot of the numbers are similar, but again, we were chiseling, we were investing way more in these maps, so we should see a higher return, which we didn't in fact see really at all. So I can probably say that the reduced amount of Legion monsters probably did have some sort of a factor on this, unfortunately, and also maybe I can't really say that Lair has a lower mob count because I know it has a higher one, so it's probably the fact that the Legions, we just didn't get as many Legion monsters, which is definitely a drawback to this indoor layout. So it really does push the fact that we should indeed be playing open layouts for more fun and for more loot. So in terms of the incubators, I will quickly just chat about this here. We got 44 again. So we got 44 in this test, we got 43 in another test, and we got 44 again in a different test. So that's scarily consistent. Very, very, very strange that we got 44 every time. Definitely something going on here, I think. And yeah, pretty interesting. Moving on, obviously we got a pretty normal spread of currency. We got 30 remnants of corruption from the yellow sextants, which is pretty interesting. And in terms of the splinters, as I mentioned, we did get a ton more Templar splinters, which is pretty interesting in my opinion. Definitely something I'm going to be testing more on an open layout, because I really want to see if red maps do drop that amount of Templar splinters, and maybe even more in more open layouts with better chance to open up that Legion spawn. In terms of sustain, you will indeed be able to sustain T11s if you chisel and do all the sextant shenanigans that I did. You can see here we got 160-ish maps back from this test, just from kind of, if I had shaped my atlas around it, those would all be the tier 11 map of my choosing. So if you do go ham on the sextants, on the chisels, on the vals, you will be able to sustain no problem. But we really already probably knew that from past leagues. Moving on, we did get 4 Wolven King's bites, so it was about 1 every 25 maps without Magic Find, which I'm not sure if that's normal. I haven't really farmed Lair too much, but it sounds pretty average to me. So that's an extra 4-ish exalts there, which is pretty nice to pay off some of these yellow sextants. Oh no. So yeah, we got some burial chambers and city squares to sell, which I already sold, and we got some other uniques, which is pretty interesting as well. So we did in fact get 1 gilded breach scarab, which I haven't actually gotten a gilded scarab yet from doing any of my white tests. So that's pretty interesting information as well. So it seems like the red drop table is just a little bit different, as kind of suggested by my proof earlier. I'd be really interested to hear more of you guys' experiences on this kind of matter, and see what you guys had to say. But I mean, the data kind of speaks for itself. We're seeing a ton more Templar, seeing a gilded breach scarab appear, and we're starting to see some other things as well, which is pretty interesting. So in terms of the profit and overall, we only made 9.5 exalts, so definitely nowhere near as good as the city square map where we made about 12 without betrayal. Obviously, if you include betrayal, you'd probably be making quite a bit more. We made about 1,000-ish, 1.2k chaos of betrayal, so definitely very lucrative, but that was a bit lucky. I hit some very lucky white sockets on certain items. But yeah, that's definitely all the data there. We'll wrap this video up with some basic points. I think red maps are probably worth investigating further, which we will be getting into in future videos. And we will also be talking about incubators coming up, as well as historic jewels. And I will, yes, by popular demand, be rebooting my tornado shot guide, which you'll be able to see in the coming days. I'll see you guys in the next one. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed and you can test out some of this stuff yourself. Probably not Lair though, because it's not too great in my tests, but I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.